Our next speaker is Jerry Mosley, who's an author of Sex Workers and Their Clients in Their Own Words, and is a retired lawyer from the Office of California Attorney General. Jerry, how are you tonight?
Thanks, Maxine. I want to follow up on the one comment from Alex about anti-trafficking, so-called anti-trafficking stings. And I want to talk for a minute about the messaging that goes from law enforcement through the press to the general public. Folks who don't know anything about this topic except what they read in the headlines. And we should all be aware of that messaging. Those folks out there reading the paper are going to hear two claims, and those claims have already been started. One claim is in connection with the Super Bowl. The police are out on a sting. It is an operation. It is a campaign. In a very excited moment, they may say it is a war against trafficking. And we're going to go out this Super Bowl season and we're going to fight the traffickers. And this is our whole point, is to address trafficking. A few days later, the general public will read another headline and it will say, so many people were arrested during this campaign, in connection with this campaign, following this campaign, people were arrested. And they'll probably give you a number, 100 people, maybe 1,000 people, I don't know. They were all arrested, period, end of headline. Now, there is a terrible problem with that kind of message, because both of those claims may actually be true. It may be the case that the police went out on some huge campaign. We don't know how huge it is, but it might be true. They may swarm the streets, we don't know. And it also may be true that while they were swarming the streets, they arrested a whole lot of people. Maybe they did arrest 100 people. But when you put those headlines together and you feed those headlines to the general public is deceived, because the implication, the obvious implication, is that those people who were arrested were traffickers, or they were involved in trafficking somehow. That's the obvious implication. Even if the press doesn't actually say it, that's what they're communicating. The moral of the story is you don't have to lie in order to be deceptive. That is the story that the public is going to get, and that is the impression that they're going to have when they put the newspaper down, and that's the last they think about it, and they go off to their full-time jobs. They're thankful that the cops have now protected them from traffickers. What the truth will actually be, if the past is any indication at all, is that those 100 people who were arrested, almost all of them, maybe all of them, will have nothing whatsoever to do with trafficking. Trafficking is sex work that's coerced, or that's brought about through fraud, or it's underage. Now, most, if not all, of these people arrested in those headlines are going to be consenting sex workers and their clients. That's it. The only thing that will happen is that those people will be oppressed, and anybody whose name gets leaked to the press in connection with that campaign, well, you know what's going to happen there. Even though they had nothing whatsoever to do with trafficking, their name is now going to be forever linked with a trafficking investigation. Why does that happen? It doesn't happen because there was any evidence ever of trafficking in this person's life. It's because of the messaging. It's because the way the general public is being manipulated. And even for those people, there may be some traffickers who get arrested. But if you're patient and you follow up, you'll notice something funny. Probably none of these people who are arrested for trafficking are ever charged with trafficking. Gee whiz, why is that? When the district attorney looks at the evidence, they say, no, there's no trafficking here. And the problem, of course, is it takes some digging and some patience to uncover this. What the media needs to do, what needs to happen, is something very simple. Law enforcement needs to be asked the real questions. Who did you arrest? Why did you arrest them? You mean there are some of them that were arrested for trafficking? What reason did you have to believe they were trafficked? Simple questions like that. I personally have never heard reporters ask law enforcement those questions. I have never heard it. I don't know why. They're simple English questions. Just ask them. The second thing that has to happen is, of course, you have to be patient and you have to wait and look and see what happens as the judicial process proceeds. And then write your next headline. Don't hide it in the back pages. The headline, it says, remember that big sting we talked about before? Nobody was charged ultimately with trafficking. Most of you probably have heard the incident in Florida. You heard about it because the owner of the New England Patriots got arrested. But that sting is a perfect example here. It was a sting of massage parlors where, God forbid, they suspected that sex was going on in there. If I may add a footnote, the safest kind of sex that two human beings can possibly engage in, but that's another story. They wanted to save us. They wanted to save us from hand jobs. So they were out there stinging away. Unfortunately, they arrested a guy with a lot of money and he defeated them rather handily. But there were other people who were arrested, poor immigrant Asian women, largely. They didn't have all of those resources. But despite the fact that all these people were arrested, hello, you guessed it, not a single one was ultimately charged with trafficking. None. One Chinese masseuse. They brought her in. They arrested her. They need to have trafficking to show the public their heroic war. They told this woman, this is an immigrant Chinese woman. You can imagine how unsophisticated and vulnerable she is. They said, we will give you an apartment. We will make sure that your children in China can come to this country to be with you if you just say you were trafficked. Will you just say that you were trafficked? That woman, I respect her more than anybody else I have read about in the press. She had more decency and honesty than the cops did. She said, no, I wasn't trafficked. They kept going. They kept pressuring her. You can imagine these detectives pressuring this poor Chinese lady who just wants to get away from them. They kept pressuring her to say that she was trafficked. Finally, they broke her down. And she said, okay, I won't say that I was not trafficked, but I'm not going to say I was trafficked. I'll just keep my mouth shut. And they let her go. That's what the cops did. I'm not saying that all cops do that, but that is disgraceful. And that is what happens when law enforcement are desperate to show trafficking as what they're really doing when they're going out arresting people like Maxine and Antonia. Thank you.